Hey everybody, this is AomIsHot22 for PokerCoachShow.com. Don't forget to go to PokerCoachShow.com and sign up to the free newsletter and fill out your contact information to get great updates about added value in certain tournaments, free rolls, all sorts of that stuff, and free webinars from coaches like myself and plenty of other fantastic coaches. Let's get into the session. Today we're going to be playing some 50L at Pokerstars. I'm probably not going to be doing too many interesting things. I think just trying to play fundamentally well seems like the way to go. Against the 3x 6-4 is kind of close, but I tend to just play pretty loose, blind versus blind. I think people often kind of like mess up, and I can obviously basically capitalize on them constructing their ranges poorly. This hand is going to be a mixed strategy hand. I roll 74, but I am going to go with the pure bet because I think you'll find a lot of people that construct their ranges to have essentially too much ace high in this particular situation, lack check raises, that sort of thing. And obviously he still will have some frequency of check raise, but when you have a population of people that essentially lack check raises, and also don't bluff turn and river that often, you're quite incentivized to just start betting. You can kind of figure this stuff out through toy games. You can look in PioSolver a node lock, but yeah, we are attempting to push a mixed strategy hand into basically I'm just pure betting the flop with 6-4 against your average guy in these stakes. Against 2.5x, A6 is very marginal. Ace-8 is definitely a pure call. A6 and A7 are marginal. However, I'm going to go with the call because these sort of like GTO ranges are predicated on the fact that they're playing optimally post-flop. And yeah, the reality is that they're not playing optimally post-flop. So as a result of that, I think they're basically just never bluffing rivers. And because of that, yeah, you just get to realize lots of EV that you're not supposed to, or if you want to call it equity, actually it's EV, but in this particular context, I am going to be playing a very aggressive strategy in terms of check raises versus continuation bets, and I'm not going to have very many calls on that particular texture. It's going to be somewhat hard for me to articulate the reasons why, but essentially you're going to see a population of people that are checking too many random king X, checking too many queens, potentially checking too many tens, and just betting too many ace highs and bluffs. And against that sort of strategy, I'm going to play a strategy that where the majority of my continues just raise, and I'm still doing a fair bit of folding, obviously. But this is going to be a continue. And when you have players that are not 3-bet bluffing as well, which he shouldn't really have very many 3-bet bluffs on this particular texture. However, yeah, we want to be very aggressive in terms of our continues. I think there are a lot of exploits to go for in these games. So we're going to try to discuss them a bit. Though this video is not going to be too long. On the King 9-8, so in position should be 3-betting the 8s and 9s. And in addition to that, the small blind range will be opening King 8 and King 9 offset. So if it was a board like, like King 7-4, obviously he'd have a lot more cheese on like various turns, like a 6. And like a 5, and it'd be very dicey because he ends up being super nutted on a bunch of those low cards, where he ends up like making trips, blah blah blah. However, this texture is much higher EV for the small blind range, so I'm going to be playing a much higher frequency continuation bet on this texture. We're going with the quarter pot. I'm electing to go with range. Turn, we have a mixed strategy combo, so we can basically go for 2/3 or overbet. I mean, well, you can use many different sizings, obviously. I am simplifying. I'm not having any leads, obviously, on the 9-9, whatever. And I'm simplifying, and I'm going for a relatively thin value here, because I think you'll find a number of players like raising King X, and while at equilibrium, it wouldn't really make sense to go with like 9x plus on the turn, especially on a 6 that is supposed to improve their range, blah blah blah, but not really. I think people basically raise too many good hands, blah blah blah. And river here, we actually block the most frequent calls of King X, and I think on the river we can pretty much just go overbet with something like King Queen plus, but hopefully better hands. I don't really mind using overbet or check. We're kind of like duplicating the blockers from the calling range that we're expecting to get called by, blah blah blah. I also I don't mind going for a slightly smaller range, but again, we're just kind of like duplicating the blockers of this exactly. He might believe that we're a little bit too polar in this line, which is kind of up to him. Against the cold calling range here, he should be very concentrated toward exactly the 3s and the 7s region. So it's very important to like note that he elected to call down with that hand. Well played by him. Against him, you can just kind of like make some adjustments. Turn, because he is still we're not having any overbets on this turn. Basically, he just has too many like fours and fives and sixes and whatnot, and we need to be fairly careful. So in terms of like the turn sizings that we'll use, probably end up using 2/3 or check. I think is pretty reasonable. River, I'm going to check fold this versus this individual. I don't think he's going to find enough like bluffs with the king queen in the king jack region. And like the pocket twos and fives and whatnot. And then if we want to find I mean, this is clearly going to be a mixed strategy bluff, if not like pretty often, because he just doesn't have that many bluffs to get here, and whatever. And yeah, I mean, in terms of our check raises, we'll be finding some check raise river bluffs with various 10x and some value raises with something like ace king. Because yeah, I mean, we block some of his check downs and we unblock some of his bluffs. Blah blah blah. Ace 10, I'm just going to pure call this, though it definitely at equilibrium would be a mixed strategy 3-bet, but again, I kind of like to just get in here and call a decent amount. Now, I am playing a very exploitative strategy on this texture. This is an incredibly high EV board for him. It's kind of scary. Now, he is using a good sizing. A lot of players are going to get greedy, though, and kind of like go for these big sizings when they have big hands, whereas when they have like bad hands, it's kind of intuitive to go smaller because essentially their perception of the situation is that our range is going to be fairly inelastic. I'm going to make a very incredibly large fold on the turn here, probably against any sort of other action, even with a club, because I exploitatively think that essentially, like, in order for them, like, there aren't very many natural bluffs, first of all. Second of all, even for the natural bluffs that make sense. And on the turn, I'm going to use a strategy of betting 40% pot and check. I don't really mind going with the bet or check. I think it's kind of like fine. I'm not really bothered either way. I do have the inkling that our opponent is not slow playing very often on the turn, and as a result of that, we could decide to bet a little bit more, but I was sort of feeling like turn I'm basically going to mix between 2/3 and check. We roll 89. It's important to not just front door everything. Yeah, especially in a spot where he's going to be delaying very often and probably too frequently. I am going to be playing a strategy where I am, yeah, and people just don't have enough check raise bluffs in this situation. I'm bluffing very aggressively. It's a spot where he doesn't have that many slow plays, and he also probably see bets a bunch of sixes on the flop and probably doesn't slow play enough exactly pocket aces. So we are going to have a relatively large turn check raise. Maybe 150, 60% is better, but I just kind of click the key. Maybe up to 200. Somewhere between 130 and 200 to be able to shove the river is essentially what we want to do. Obviously, in these polar situations, it would be a terrible mistake to not be able to shove the river. So yeah, we need to have a bunch of bluffs here as well, and we will have a bunch of bluffs with clubs and with various 6x. We'll turn some 6x into a bluff. Blah blah blah. I don't know what's going on here. He decides to delay pot on the 8, but we have a 4. We're going to go to the call. Actually, I would have preferred to probe this because of the in positions checking range. I like to play incredibly aggressive turn probing strategies against the majority of players. This ace jack is obviously just losing a bunch of EV to decide to just go for such a large sizing on turn delay. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't add a whole lot of value to a strat. It's going to have some cold calls with king queen, but mostly 3-betting versus UTG. These players are also not 4-betting enough, which kind of gives you a little bit more incentive to go with the 3-bets. If you're not being 4-bet, it's just kind of nice to realize equity every single time you end up hitting the flop. At equilibrium, it might seem like, oh, you should just be checking king 7 here. The issue is that they don't bluff raise the turn, and actually they end up probably check raising more flush draws than they're supposed to, and they end up having just like a range that's concentrated in exactly like ace jack sort of nonsense and like ace 3. So if you really think about how they construct their ranges, this is definitely going to be a higher EV turn bet than it would be, I say, at equilibrium, especially because of the fact that people just won't be check raise bluffing something like ace jack with the jack of diamonds, ace 10 with the ace of diamonds, etc., etc. Obviously, easy river check here. He gets here with just a bunch of random diamonds. He elected to float the flop with 10-8 with the 10 of diamonds. Well played by him. Turns, it looks like maybe the 5-6 is kind of concerning, but against 2x, he doesn't really have 7-6 off. He doesn't really have 5-4 off. Yeah, it's not really that concerning of a card, basically. In terms of the sizes that we can use, though, and what he needs to defend, I actually think going something like with our range, I think going like about like 90% and then kind of like changing on the river makes a little bit more sense, to be honest, just because of the fact that the six does actually end up making him a few more two pairs of, like queen six of hearts, blah blah blah. Our hand, if he checked, would give up 100% on the river. We're just blocking his call folds too heavily. His river donk is obviously not a thing either. He probably just binks exactly king queen, I think. Yeah, that's probably what's going on. But yeah, essentially I just went for the slightly smaller bet than the over bet because of the fact that he'll just be forced to defend less, and we kind of want to put less money in with a sort of overpair region on this particular turn. I understand that 5-4 is supposed to 3-bet pre, it's supposed to check raise flop occasionally, blah blah blah, but it is the six of spades. He has a bunch of like pocket sixes with a club, blah blah blah. He isn't going to be like bluff raising though particularly often, which would incentivize us to be using larger bets. Turn, yeah, this is a mixed strategy combo. Just basically any combo that I'm going with, I'm going 2/3, and I'm going to be ramping up the aggression with any of my mixes for the turn bluff. There, I think they're again, they're not finding check raise bluffs, and our hand works pretty well. They're going to fold a whole bunch. Ace 9 definitely can mix in the 3-bet. I don't have very much info on him, but I would just mix this bet. He seems semi-tight. I don't like to rely on HUD stats too often, but it's not a pure bet, pure 3-bet versus middle position for me anyways. The 10-7 in the cutoff absolutely could be an open, but I am probably playing a little bit tighter today, just trying to get through hands. Essentially, the EV of like 10-7 is minuscule, but it is plus EV, especially against these players. However, I think my hourly is probably just going to be higher if I play a little bit tighter in these games. I'm not really sure what to make of the cold calling range here. He elects to go with pot. I don't really care about GTO. It's kind of like, do we want to go all in and realize all of our equity, or like, do we want to call and then occasionally fold? Actually, this is not the easiest spot to quantify. I don't think this guy ever has a fold here. And on the turn, there's going to be 70 something. He's going to jam. We're only going to have about 30-odd% equity. I actually think calling is going to be very slightly higher EV and folding turn because he's never going to have a bluff here, and he's mostly just going to have a whole bunch of really good stuff. You could argue that like jamming flop makes more money. It certainly would make a lot of sense. This Gustus guy is like an incredibly stationary, it seems like. So a lot of our like mixed strategy hands we will like to check. However, I mean, this particular combo just should be mostly blasting away. I again am playing very aggressive. I realize range versus range. I mean, yeah, I'm just gonna basically check my mostly turn pure bet because this guy seems to be overcalling, and yeah, most of my continues here I'm just gonna be playing as a raise because people basically just get greedy and go bigger and they don't find 3-bets and blah blah blah. Going with the river check, we could actually end up check jamming this combo, but yeah, I mean, turn he would be blocking a bunch of bluffs, but he would still probably call 10s because he's a whale. So easy check on the river. Oh my god, did you not bluff Jack 9? Jesus Christ. The biggest leak in these games by far is not bluffing. Like that is the biggest problem with people at 15L is they just never bluff river. They can fire some like natural shots on like flop and turn, but they don't fucking find the river bluffs. And against those sort of opponents, we mostly should just be calling here, but the big blind's probably not 3-betting us enough. I don't think we're finding enough limp raises. King Queen is actually kind of close here. I don't think the big blind ever has a bluff, but I'm also somewhat convinced that he'll actually like go slightly larger in general. This is kind of close because I think he'll just have a reasonable amount of queens that are just weaker here, and I'll go like $10 if he has a better, like if he has a 10, and then if he's doing that with mostly queens, we kind of like beat a bunch of queens, and I don't think the rec is really having very many donk small 3-bets. Like I don't think he has very much, so I think we kind of just call. The a6 can definitely 3-bet, can fold as well. Doesn't really matter. This hand is not going to generate much EV, so if you kind of just want to like get in a bunch of hands, I don't mind it. Again, this is like really a pure fold, so I'm actually going to fold this. I know I'm raising a bunch of hands, but I'm mostly raising my continuing range. Oh wow, that is scary. Okay. Oh man, the fucking fireworks. I'm gonna sit out next big blind. This is gone on for long enough. Oh man, he goes $20. Good Lord have mercy. For this guy to like call a 3-bet, he definitely needs a 10. He better not be calling with a queen, or he's just like a massive whale. I'm going range for a third here. I'm gonna jam the turn. Oh man, this guy's tanking with a queen, isn't he? What the fuck? Oh, okay. What the fuck? Are you serious? You didn't go all in with like pocket eights against a fish? Are you joking? Bro, what are you doing? Like, come on now. Sorry, I don't want to be so insulting as I'm supposed to be like doing this coaching thing, but this way, I mean, for you not to go all in against a recreational player when you have a full house here is just like so bad. Like, you're losing so much value. This is so bad. Like, what the fuck are you afraid of? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Wow. I cannot believe that. Here we're bidding the turn with a 9 here. This might look thin, but essentially people raise too many kings. They have too weak of a range. We're bluffing very frequently as well on the turn. I'm going to go with the river check. And yeah, I'm going with the river pitch. He will have exactly like Jack 10 reasonably often, but like what can you do? Nice hand. I mean, maybe it's not politically correct in the like, poker world to be like calling people whales, but like fuck that shit. Like if you're a damn regular and you have pocket eights and you're not getting all the money against a fish in this situation because you're scared of a hand that the guy never fucking has, like you need to really think about what's going on in your game and you need to do a hell of a lot of work because you obviously don't understand what's going on. And I mean, you make money in poker by like beating fish, and the fish obviously just has a 10 like most of the time. Maybe, I mean, I don't think he has really almost anything else. Obviously, he has Jack 9 in this example, but like hand reading, and then look at the fucking river sizing as well. Like, this is ridiculous. You only bet $10. Like fish are very often just gonna go all in if they have a house. Like this is so bad. Wow. Yeah, man, you got to get the money versus fish. Anyways, guys, this is AomIsHot22 for PokerCoachShow.com. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much, and peace out.